Hello, and welcome to the season finale of ACRO's Good Clinical Podcast, Season 2. Today I'm joined by two excellent guests to give us industry and government perspectives on the state of clinical trials in the UK. Professor Lucy Chappell is the Chief Scientific Advisor for the Department of Health and Social Care, with overall responsibility for the department's research and development, including the National Institute for Health and Care Research, NIHR. Lucy is also Professor of Obstetrics at King's College London, Honorary Consultant Obstetrician at Guy's and St. Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust, and an NIHR Senior Investigator. Dr. Steve Cutler is the CEO of ICON plc and has served in this role since March 2017. Steve joined ICON in 2011 and previously served in the roles of Group President of Clinical Research Services and Chief Operating Officer. As ICON is an ACRO member, Steve served as Chair of the ACRO Board of Directors in 2021. Let's get into the episode. Lucy and Steve, thank you so much for joining me today. This is a really exciting episode. I'm looking forward to it. It's sort of, in a way, a follow-on from an episode we did in season 1, where we talked with a former ACRO board member, an ACRO committee member, and Lord O'Shaughnessy off of his review into clinical trials in the UK. And now we won't really be directly talking about that, but I think it's a nice place. We're a year on now, kind of a nice time for us to pick up and check in on how things are going in the UK clinical trials wise. We do a lot of US focused work, so we want to make sure we're really pulling in, the perspective from our UK partners as well. I think maybe Steve, I'll kick off with you first. You are the CEO at ICON. You lead one of the largest global CROs. From your perspective, what do you see as the main differences when you're looking at conducting clinical trials in the UK versus the US?
Sure, thanks, Sophia. Nice to be here and nice to participate in the podcast. I think briefly, the US is almost a logarithmic scale larger in terms of clinical trials than any of the individual European countries. We've done some data. I have some data from ICON over the last 2020 to 2023, looking at our sort of clinical trials across UK, France, Germany, and of course the US. And it's really pretty clear that no matter how you measure it, whether it be the number of trials, whether it be the number of sites, whether it be the number of patients recruited, the US is a much larger market, a much larger place to do clinical research. And we'll get into those reasons, I'm sure, at the moment. But in terms of trials, and this is just ICON data, just to be clear, and it's just over that 4-year period. We do something like 1,000. We've done something like 1,000 trials in the US. And at the same time, it's around about 200 trials in the UK, France and Germany. France and Germany, UK sort of are fairly similar in terms of numbers of trials, numbers of sites, numbers of patients. But the US is, as I say, significantly on the site side of things. We're at something like 18,000 sites over the last 4 years, whereas in Europe it's about 1,000 sites per country. So again, it's a big difference. Patients. There's some vaccine work in there, although we've tried to exclude the vaccine work because that can sort of change the data a little bit. But, we're well over 350,000 patients in the US over that 4-year period. It's something like 5,000 to 6,000 patients in each of the European countries. So the US is a very big, for obvious reasons, it's the biggest market in the world. Every customer that we work for wants to get registration there. So it's the go-to place. You need to, I think the conventional wisdom is you need to recruit something like 20% of your patients in the US if you want to get registration or marketing there. In terms of, there's some stats in terms of output. Startup times tend to be faster in the US. They have a system of central IRB mutual recognition that seems to make things faster. And this is across a wide range of therapeutic areas. But, it's around 8 months to get a trial started in the US. It's about 12 to 14, again, in the UK, France and Germany. Similar, not much difference between the European countries, but it's significantly faster in the US. Recruitment rates, on the other hand, are more similar, around a patient per site per month, again, across a variety of areas. So if you're working all in oncology, of course, that's much slower. If you're in vaccines, that's much faster. So, while it's a little unfair to sort of compare just country to country without looking at the therapeutic areas, but basically recruitment, it's probably 10% faster in the US, but it's fairly marginal and similar in UK, France and Germany at around about 0.8, 0.9 patients per site per month. So that's the way that that we look at that data over that 4-year period, Sophia. The US is a huge market from a pharmaceutical point of view, and it's a huge market from a clinical development point of view.
Yeah, quite a few people in the US, turns out, quite a lot.
It's a little unfair. What, 5 times the population of UK, France, and Germany? So it's a different scale, but certainly the research that's done there is significant.
Yeah. And Lucy, I wonder from your perspective, obviously working for the UK government, and maybe also from your perspective in your prior career, what do you see as sort of the biggest challenges and opportunities when we think about conducting commercial clinical trials in the UK?
Thank you. I think there's a number of different aspects. I mean, we're really ambitious at the moment to ensure that the UK has got a really coherent, comprehensive approach to offer to CROs, but also more widely to commercial clinical trials. We have the NHS, and that can be both an opportunity and a challenge, and we would like to make sure that it's an opportunity. It is a healthcare system that should be joined up, and although we all know that you need to go to individual sites, there's a huge amount of work to look at increasing the connectedness of those sites, for example, through our National Contract Value Review programme, to try and say, as far as possible, we want to have the perception that you're contracting once. We've also had an agile regulatory environment. If you think of some of the discussions during the COVID pandemic, when we accepted immunobridging for new variant vaccines compared to other countries. And really a crucial one is the diversity of our population. So in one country of 66 million, we've really moved many approaches to trying to ensure that you can reach a very diverse population. It was well shown off through the COVID pandemic when we recruited to our vaccine trials and to the recovery trial at a pace and a scale the like of which we hadn't seen before. But we're equally determined to ensure that not only can we replicate that approach for many other diseases, but that we extend a lot of that work into other areas and really make sure it sticks.
Yeah, no, I think there's some great opportunities as we kind of think about how we keep the momentum going and kind of build on some of that stuff that you just mentioned. I want to come back to the NCVR, but before we get there, the NIHR Clinical Research Network, or CRN, as I think most people refer to it, has recently been rebranded as the RDN, the Research Delivery Network. Can you just share for our audience any sort of tangible changes and improvements that ACRO members and other stakeholders in the industry see from this?
So to take stock, the CRN is widely seen as an incredible offer in the UK system because what it does is ensure that there is an army, a workforce across the NHS. So rather than hiring and firing sort of per project, you can access the resources of the CRN. And both when I've been travelling internationally, I'm often asked about this model, but actually as in my lifetime as an investigator, I'm a professor of obstetrics and I do clinical trials, I've seen the difference that it makes. Your study comes on the portfolio, it gets accepted, you access the CRN teams, and it just helps the studies to flow. And I really hope that we can get that message across for the CRO audience. So the RDN's got sort of 2 primary purposes. The first one is that we want to support the successful delivery of high quality research and be really active partners with CROs, but also many of our stakeholders. And we also want to think about our second purpose is to increase the capacity and capability of our research delivery infrastructure, and the workforce are a crucial part of that. So why did we rebrand? Because research delivery is taking place in even more settings than before. So the clinical research network had connotations of being quite secondary care centric, and we really want to think about how to ensure that research can be delivered where it's needed. And we've had a focus on pushing out to primary care, community care, social care settings where the research should happen. So as part of that change, we've gone to really push on a single organisation and to really look at that consistency across the different regions, thinking about that clear leadership, working with, looking at how we work with key partners like CROs, thinking about a more strategic approach to that research capacity and capability, and then sort of also driving continuous improvement. So not resting on any laurels, but really saying how do we go forward. So we really look at the opportunity to listen to CROs who have got this vital role, to work with them, and to say, we're all broadly trying to go for the same ends, which is to make a difference to our patients and public through clinical research, and think about how this might be done. So a couple of examples is we want to work with CROs on access to data, look about the self-service capabilities, think about how CROs are going to approach planning and placing studies in the UK. And that sort of bi-directional discussions with CROs will be crucial. So I'm positive. I think that sometimes when you're in transition, it feels a bit bumpy, but we are very clear on our vision of where we want to go to, and really to continue to see commercial trials thriving and increasing in the UK.
And Steve, do you have any thoughts, hopes, dreams, kind of what you see from this rebrand?
I have lots of hopes and dreams, Sophia, particularly around clinical research, and some of the things Lucy mentioned in terms of getting people more involved in clinical research at a primary, in a primary sort of situation, I think resonate very well. I mean, I think we all know that it's only 3 to 5% of people who actually participate in clinical trials. I'd love to see that number at 25% or 30% or more than that, and that's something we're very keen to support, and I'm sure Lucy would be in the same boat there. I think that in terms of the CRN, that sounds like a terrific initiative, and I really hope that can move forward. We've seen a number of initiatives in the past in the UK. I'll be honest with you, not a lot has happened, or at least not a lot has happened over the last few years. So I'm optimistic that this time it's going to be a little different. The real thing, I mean, for us, in terms of bringing clinical research to any country, it's a competitive situation. We and our customers obviously have a big say in this, but whether we go to the US, whether we go to France, whether we go to Germany, Italy, the UK, it really depends upon how fast we can get a trial approved. That's a really important part of it. How fast we can find sites and identify and start those sites up. And then how fast we can recruit patients. There are a lot of good investigators around the world, but the regulatory systems and the processes that they work within do differ. And that's where I think we can help to make a difference through Lucy and the research network and the team. That's where I think we really need to sort of think about standardized sort of contracts. Contracts with sites are probably the thing that is most on the critical path for us as clinical development organisations. They slow us down. They're the things that cost us the most time. So if we could get to a point where we have a standard contract, across the country that was basically accepted by all sites and obviously by the NIHR, that would be a real move forward. And, a budget template that obviously budgets change on a per trial basis, but a template which allocates the costs on a sort of standard way, processes that allow us to get approvals, mutual recognition, all of those sorts of things would really help an individual country to start up and then recruit faster into the clinical trial. And that's really what's going to give them the differential advantage in terms of the competition with other countries.
Well, maybe I'll skip ahead. I was going to save this question for one more, but it just keeps coming up. So maybe let's jump there. Lucy, can you tell us a little bit about the NCVR, how it works, the goals, and then maybe what feedback you've started to receive from sites and industry on the value of, this whole program?
Thank you. So again, the National Contract Value Review is probably something close to my heart as an investigator because I've sort of lived through it. And actually, I think it's a hugely important initiative, which is basically a system-wide process to really help our sort of different parts of the research ecosystem function collaboratively and to speed up the costing, the contracting activities for commercial sponsors, but I've certainly got ambitions to go further so that we really embed it into the system. And really to look, this is for our multi-site studies using model agreements and a standardized pricing structure that gets reviewed regularly. We rolled out NCVR in October 2023, and we set an expectation that it would be adopted at 100% of sites. We weren't going for 90. We said this is how we are going to do it. It's new to the system, but we're seeing, so inevitably we'll see some bedding in, but we're certainly hearing very positively from many different parts of the system. And as I say, that's just a sort of one step. We want to go further. We know, as with anything, that there are teething problems, so we've built in sort of a troubleshooting process and an escalation procedure, and to say, we want to hear from colleagues where things aren't always smooth. So the reduction in time for study setup has been really clear. So currently 131 days quicker than the previous financial year. And we will continue to push that because, as Steve says, it's all about country competitiveness. And we know that this is an important metric for a global company. It also means that you have to work across sort of our regulatory system. So you can't just address a bulge in one part of the system and then have another bit of the system not working. So this is about a team effort in the UK to help across all of the different bits. And we're really seeing that pay dividends. So, for example, we've had some industry feedback, which has really said that, has led to a study being the first site open for recruitment. And we are seeing a number of sort of global firsts, as I hope, and I would like to continue pushing on our global firsts. But actually, we're also getting feedback from sites that they like this. They don't need to repeatedly negotiate. And we've got sites saying this helps us. So, it saves time, it saves resource. Commercial sponsors just want to get underway. CROs want to make it smooth. And they know they all want that competitive edge. So I hope that this isn't a once and done. This is a once, improve, learn, and then actually the more we can push it out to all of our studies, the more I think we will embed it as the way to do research.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts there, Steve, on the contracting?
That sounds terrific. That's exactly what we need. I mean, more power to you, Lucy, because at the end of the day, commercial organisations, be it CROs or farmers, will vote with their feet. And where they see tangible benefits of coming to the UK, there's no question the research standards and the investigators and the medical standards are first rate. Everyone wants to come in, but you've got competition. That. France, Germany, they've got first-rate investigators as well. They've got a substantial population as well. And so it's around the regulatory environment, the contracting, the processing, but that's where I think you're going to get that different. And that's the initiative you just described. Sounds terrific. Got to implement, got to action. And if we see the tangible benefits, then, as I say, they'll be beating a path to your door.
Yeah. And I want to stick with you, Steve, for just one more question here. So on the sort of more process related things, you were on the ACRO board for a number of years. You were a board chair at one point. And last year, the ACRO board kind of got hot on the issue of the struggle that the NIHR was having to meet statutory timelines for application review. We did a little bit of data collection across our membership, trying to compare that to some of like the public data we could find. We reran that survey earlier this year, and we've seen a pretty rapid change in the situation year on year. Can you just talk a little bit about the goals of that data collection and where, we're seeing MHRA's average timelines, I'll say, for review kind of standing currently? And then Lucy, I'll pop it over to you too for some thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. No, I think it's one of the good things ACRO does is we collect data from a number of organisations. So we have quite a substantial sort of baseline of data around the clinical trial applications, around the substantial amendments, and I think around the early phase 1 applications as well. And so, it was really quite interesting, the data that came out from the ACRO survey. And this is data that was really collected from January 2023 through to about March 2024. And they actually collected in two different areas. First was basically 2023, January to November 2023, and then from December 23 to March. So the last part of the day was sort of a 4-month period, December through to March. And it's really a tale of two cities, if that makes sense, really across whether it be clinical trial applications, substantial amendments, or the early phase stuff. The initial period was pretty challenging, to not to put too fine a point on it. in terms of, I think there were something like 150 applications submitted on the CTA side of things. 80 to 90% of them were well outside the 60-day period. And I think it was, I think this, Sophia, was causing a lot of frustration amongst our members that we weren't getting the responses back up until in that initial sort of 10, 12-month period. However, I think the really good news is that since then, it's really turned around. And since December 23, and the survey data we have is through till March 24, on all counts, clinical trial applications, the substantial amendments, and of course the phase one as well, is that the NIHR have really got their act together, and it's a much better number. There's still a number. It's in the sort of half or so, 40% are still outside the 60 days. So there's still, I think, work to do. But we're very, very encouraged, I think, by the progress that MHRA have made in the more recent times, and that's up until March this year. We'd like to think that as we go forward, that those numbers will get even better. We'll have maybe. I mean, there's always going to be, I guess, some controversial and some need to go outside the timelines. But we'd like to think that might come down to more like 10 or 20% of applications rather than where we are now, and certainly where we were in the future. But it's so, as I say, it's very much improving story, which I think is encouraging for the industry. But we'd like obviously to see that improvement continue.
Yeah, I would say the vibes in our last board meeting had certainly improved from the one before. But Lucy, yeah, I would love to kind of hear your perspective, just sort of how the government's kind of keeping on this good track that we've seen the progress kind of trend towards.
So I completely acknowledge the challenge of as the backlog built up and the multiple steps that were taken. And you make a really important point. It's not enough to tackle the backlog unless you also change something about the run rate. And so we've been looking at our data since September 2023, and our data say that 100% of applications since September 2023 have met the target of the statutory timeline for within 60 days. And MHRA now publishes its data on a very regular basis. We also oversee the Health Research Authority, the HRA, and it's obviously a huge advantage that they're now going through combined review. And have been for a number of years, and we're completely committed to maintaining that. I think the point is it's all bits of the pipeline, and sometimes it can feel a bit stop-start. So it's really heartening that we've ensured that we are meeting our statutory timeline turnaround for 100%. But it's also about the next steps, the bits before and afterwards, and ensuring, as I say, that we maintain that run rate and that it doesn't slip back. So I think we've sort of there are improvements embedded across a number of ways, so that applicants can make can get those applications in, because we know that we want that UK to be a destination. So, for example, the notification scheme was launched in October 2023, and again, that reduces the time to process applications by more than 50%. And it comes back to that sort of whole system approach that we're doing. So we do look and ensure that, we ask, how do we remain competitive? And then what do we need to do to make it predictable and sustainable on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, that's great. No, I think, there's a lot of future looking going on in our conversation today. I think we're seeing some positive trends and we just want to keep them going. In the vein of forward looking, there's been a lot of talk in the US. I think the trending hot topics of the moment, for a few years now has been obviously diversity and inclusion in clinical trials. I would say like the buzzword of the past year or so is AI and machine learning. Curious from both of you, maybe Steve, I'll have you start and then Lucy to kind of follow up. What are the buzzwords? What are the hot topics in the UK? Are they the same? Are they totally different? Are they the same, but we're thinking about them in different ways? What are you seeing?
I think it's not a country specific, these sorts of things. The trends in global clinical development, Sophia, broadly across all of the areas we do trials. And diversity inclusion is certainly an important component. It really sprung out of COVID. And the importance of getting that diverse population into our trials to make sure that any conclusions we make are valid and verifiable and able to be extrapolated to all people. That continues to be a big focus for us at ICON, but also I think for the industry as a whole. AI and machine learning, gosh, I mean, we could talk for days about it, and the opportunities that appear to be there in terms of identifying patients, identifying the right sites, and being able to contact those patients. I'm dare I say it, I've been around long enough to think that maybe it's not going to happen quite as fast as sometimes as people think. It won't perhaps quite the impact. But I think long term, we are going to be doing things very differently in 3 to 5 years' time than we are now. And I think the AI and the machine learning, robotics, the algorithms, the ubiquity of data around the moment, and our ability to process that data is going to present, I think, huge opportunities for us to find patients for clinical trials. I hope we can work through some of the more process-related challenges that can, potentially sort of make us stumble in that area. As I say, we talked about the standardized contract. There are a lot of good initiatives around that. Those are the sort of very practical things that we have to solve in order for us to get the benefits of things like AI, in order to get those diverse populations. So we have a number of, dare I say it, they're fairly straightforward to talk about. They're always very difficult to sort out. We've been talking about this for a long time, and it doesn't make it any easier. So mutual recognition of contracts, mutual recognition of ethics approvals. I think that's one of the advantages that the US has in terms of central IRB review for private sites. That's one of the reasons they're significantly faster than the countries in Europe. And I think all of those sorts of things, can be looked at for the UK and other countries in Europe. But there's a number of areas there. I really do think the AI has huge potential, but it won't happen as fast as I think a lot of people think.
Yeah, Lucy, any thoughts from you? Anything to add to sort of the vision, for the future? And I don't know, could we have like global harmonization one day? I don't know. What do you think?
So I'm going to ask for 4 buzzwords: innovation, investment, impact, and inclusion. And importantly, I don't want them to stay as buzzwords. I want them to turn into actions. So each of them matter. So for innovation, I think it's really interesting sort of reflecting on what Steve said, which is what are the innovations that are actually going to make a difference to the trial processes that actually lead to a step change. But even some of the areas that we touched on earlier, such as decentralization, innovating in trial design, reaching more patients in the public through primary care, community care, are all crucial. We want to think about our investment and investment by others, CROs, commercial sponsors, so that we can all drive for that improvement. I really liked Steve's vision of just normalizing research and embedding research across care, which is something that I, as a clinician, really see when I go and work in the NHS. That is my vision. Impact. We've got to ask, what are we doing this for? We're doing it to make an impact for patients and public. And actually, if we all keep that at the heart of what we do, then it drives us forward. But actually, we touched on inclusion and why it matters. And I come back to why research inclusion is crucial. Inclusion matters. You can say it's clearly good for the patients. I will actually, as a clinician scientist, say it's about the science. So strong science is saying is science that is relevant to everyone, not just to a narrow subset of patients. I'm also going to say it's good for economic benefit, because if you can do it, if we can do clinical research in a way that is for representative of the population, we know that we will then be far more likely to see faster adoption into practice. We will get results that are representative, and that will really address that next sort of translational gap, which is that adoption into innovation. So when I do multi-site trials, I really like to go across the country. I like to really push for the diversity of our population, so that everyone feels it's people like them who are taking part, and that the results will matter to people like me. So I think those are my buzz words, or even better, my buzz actions, so that we can really look at how the UK can be a truly competitive place to do research. We're releasing our CRN statistics. Yet again, we've got over 1 million people taking part in research. We've seen a big increase in those taking part in commercial clinical research, and that's due to a number of policy and finance levers that we've pulled and that we're completely committed to. It's not just this is research for everyone, and we're very clear that it's good for patients and public. It's actually good for our workforce, all of our workforce, CROs included. And then it's good for the system, and we will keep going out with those messages to help us make a difference.
Those are some pretty good messages, I would say. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head of, like I said, that sort of forward-looking, how do we keep building upon progress? So I think you really drove that home today for our audience, who I'm hoping is also very much enjoying this episode. And this has been a really fun opportunity to sit down with both of you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And also thank you to all your members who work on this. I'm passionate about it, and we see that across many of your members. So thank you to all those who are participating in this.
I'd like to thank you, Lucy. You're obviously very passionate about this topic, and more power to you. And if there's anything I would say that ACRO can do to help you with your mission and your goal, then we're very much like to do that. We want to do more research in the UK, and we certainly want to do it, as efficiently and effectively as we can. So our doors are open to you should you need or should we be able to help.
Lovely.
All right.
Awesome. Thank you both. I hope you enjoyed the episode and hopefully the entire season of GCP. This brings us to the end of season 2. I've been your host, Sophia McLeod, and we'll see you back here shortly for season 3.